G'day you mob, Pete here, and this is another episode of Aussie English, the number one place for anyone and everyone wanting to learn Australian English. So today I have a Goss episode for you where I sit down with my old man, my father, Ian Smissen, and we talk about the week's news, whether locally down under here in Australia or non-locally overseas in other parts of the world. Okay, and we sometimes also talk about whatever comes to mind, right? If we can think of something interesting to share with you guys related to us or Australia, we also talk about that in the Goss. So these episodes are specifically designed to try and give you content about many different topics where we're obviously speaking in English and there are multiple people having a natural and spontaneous conversation in English. So it is particularly good to improve your listening skills. In order to complement that though, I really recommend that you join the podcast membership or the academy membership at aussieenglish.com.au, where you will get access to the full transcripts of these episodes, the PDFs, the downloads, and you can also use the online PDF reader to read and listen at the same time. Okay, so if you really want to improve your listening skills fast, get the transcript, listen and read at the same time, keep practicing, and that is the quickest way to level up your English. Anyway, I've been rabbiting on a bit. I've been talking a bit. Let's just get into this episode, guys. Smack the bird, and let's get into it. Alrighty. G'day, guys. Welcome to this episode of the Goss.
Here we are, back again.
Back again. How are you going,
Dad?
Dad?
Drink.
Still good. Well, it's a different drink, Dad.
Yeah.
The other ones were in the previous episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's the story?
Well, you sent me the story.
Did
Yeah, I'm not going to get distracted like I did last time. You sent me the story about the platypus being declared as endangered in Victoria.
Yeah.
And I thought that's a good opportunity because one of the tags in that story is about citizen science. So I thought it'd be a good idea to talk about a couple of examples of that, some of which I've been involved in, and just as an interesting idea of how people can get involved in large-scale scientific studies. So
go for it. Give us the treatment.
You can tell us a story about the platypus if you want, or do you want me to?
This is another case of me reading my stories and not yours. So,
all right. Well, you send it to me, so yeah, I'll do it if you like.
You go for it.
So this is about a week ago.
Yeah.
The Victorian government listed. So I'm reading a bit here. Listed the platypus as threatened in Victoria, which is a sort of broader scale than specifically endangered, but it basically means that the population is in trouble, whatever the population is. And that's part of the problem, is that there's very little broad-scale studies of platypus across the state or across Australia to understand where they are, how they're surviving, whether they're reproducing well or doing any of that sort of stuff.
Because platypi, or is it platypus?
Platypi. Well, it's platypi technically from the original root of the language.
Discus and disci?
No, discus and discuses.
I always get confused.
Discus is Greek,
with these
which is
Latin
just
Greek words.
Yeah, whereas Latin, the plural with a word ending in US in Latin is I. So platypus, platypi, octopus, octopi.
Yeah.
So whereas discus is discuses. So go on.
They're very cryptic, right? So that's why it's hard. They live in the water. They tend to live in burrows on the banks of rivers and estuaries and, well, maybe not estuaries, but water, freshwater areas. And so they're very difficult to find usually because they're so skittish and like to keep to themselves, active at night.
Yeah, so this was a really cool study by a group looking at large-scale just evidence of where they are as a starting point. So, and you know yourself, having done mammal work and reptile work, that just going out to places and trapping is about the only way that you can find it. Or putting up cameras and other ways. Mammals, you can collect scats, you can collect fur samples, those sort of things. But with an aquatic animal, an animal lives in water, it's very difficult. You can't go out there and put cameras up in every bit of every river and things to try and find them, and you can't trap them very easily. And even trapping them is dangerous if they're underwater. You don't want to be trapping them in water and so on. So there's the study they came up with was saying, well, they can do large-scale population evaluations by taking environmental DNA. So just taking water samples and testing it for platypus DNA.
Yeah.
And I thought that's a really cool way of doing it. I'd never heard of the idea before of actually just taking DNA out of water samples.
And soil samples
species.
too. Yeah, that's been on the go since I was doing my PhD in evolutionary biology. So they were doing that at the time for fish species, I think, in different areas. And they could just take a bit of water, run it through the... extract the DNA from it and then see if you could PCR up any of these different loci.
Yeah. So I thought that was a really interesting story. And then I thought about it and said, well, how many other of these so-called citizen science things where this is not a small group of scientists who are going to go out and sample every piece of water in Victoria. They're just asking people to sample water and send it into them.
Yeah.
And so how many other sort of studies are being done like that? And there's a bunch of them, it turns out, some of which I was aware of before, but there's one around echidnas, which echidnas are Australia's widest distributed mammal. They're, along with platypus, they're the most primitive mammals. They're monotremes, so they don't give live birth. They lay eggs and raise those, hatchlings out, and they're the only two groups of mammals that do that. And so echidnas, again, because they're really widespread and they live in all sorts of, almost from desert to rainforest, across Australia, and there's a species in New Guinea as well. But other than knowing that they're around, there's been very little sort of broad-scale studies done of them. And so now there's just this another little citizen science thing just saying, if you see an echidna, take a photograph of it and send it to us. Geotag the photograph. And so they're going to start to build up a database of where echidnas actually are around Australia. Again, they're not unusual to see. You can be driving along the road and see an echidna on the side of the road. But if you went out looking for echidnas, you might never find one.
Well, and this is sort of like the Sean Dooley thing that he was talking about with kookaburras slowly disappearing from suburbia. And the only way that they've discovered that is through doing the citizen science bird week, where they get people to go out there and for 20 minutes on a single day just record which birds they see. And I think that was when he realized... In a location,
you don't move, you just sit. Yeah.
And he was saying that through that data, they realized that kookaburras are becoming less common in suburban areas, despite people still seeing them from time to time. But the only way for you to really know is by having your finger on the pulse with that kind of data coming in. And it'll be especially interesting to see how it goes over the long term, right? I imagine a lot of this is funded by museums, or at least related to them. Museums,
or the case of Bird Week one, where is funded by BirdLife Australia.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's an international thing. BirdLife as an international organisation, and many countries do the same thing in the same week. Just go out and see how many birds you can see in your backyard.
Yeah.
The Backyard Birds Project, it started off being called. So,
do you think this is a sort of privilege of the modern age now, where people do have the kind of spare time and money in terms of income and everything to be able to do that kind of thing, and to be able to have the time and interest to pursue those sorts of backyard biology, science, studies and everything? Because it seems like there are more and more people now interested in things like the Australian Bird Week and these sorts of citizen science things. And I mean, that term is probably only 10 years old, exactly. Citizen science, where the average Joe can get involved and collect information that can be used by scientists to help wild animals or solve other problems or investigate other things. Do you think that is because we live in a day and age now where we are so affluent? Because I imagine that there are very few people doing that in places like Ethiopia, or where they have more pertinent issues to worry about than whether or not they can count birds in their backyard.
Yeah, look, I think it is. Well, there's two aspects to it. I think there's the backyard birds is a good example of something that doesn't cost anybody anything other than 20 minutes of your time.
Yeah.
And you could do it 20 times during that week in 20 different locations and record that data if you wanted to. But mostly the idea is that just get everybody who's interested just to sit in their backyard for 20 minutes and just record which birds they see.
Yeah.
And so that's a sort of very low level of engagement into that citizen science thing. But if you get 1 million people doing it across the country, and I have no idea of how many you actually have, but if you get that sort of numbers, even 100,000 people doing it,
it's vastly
you get huge
more
amounts
than
of
an
data.
individual could ever do.
Exactly. You get huge amounts of data all taken at
Simultaneously, right?
At the same time, within a week.
Yeah.
So you get this huge snapshot of what's going on, and then you repeat it the next year and the next year and the next year. And then you get these, not only do you get geographically distributed data collection, but you get longitudinal data as well. And so that sort of thing is a huge project, but it requires very little motivation and input from an individual to do it. Then there are the sort of the next step up is one that I've been involved in for a few years. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it this year because of COVID, but that's the southeastern red-tailed black cockatoo, which is a bit of a mouthful for a species name or a subspecies.
Hence the southwest.
Southeast, southwest. But red-tailed black cockatoos in southeastern Australia are threatened again, and they're very specific in terms of where they will feed and where they will breed.
What do you mean threatened again?
Threatened as another species being threatened. Sorry.
Gotcha. Yeah. No. It's interesting that you said that. I was like, were they threatened previously and we saved them? We got them back from the brink?
Sorry, that was my poor use of the English language.
Who are again threatened.
Yes, threatened, like we were just talking about. Red-tailed black cockatoos in southeastern Australia, very small numbers of them, and because they are very specific to where they will feed and where they will breed, every year in May, there's a project that's being run in southwestern Victoria and southeastern South Australia, so that little pocket around the South Australian border, where a bunch of people, including me, we go out and we'd be given an area and we would simply drive around looking for either the birds or their sound, because often you can't see them because they're up in the tops of trees, but you can hear them, or the evidence of them feeding, because the way they feed is they're basically just ripping off bits of gum trees and dropping them on the ground. So you get these, quite large branches, metre or two long, as piles of these things where they've been feeding in a particular thing, where it's done in May in these areas because there's a lot of one particular species that they like that fruits at that time. Of eucalyptus that fruits at that time. So they're going to be out feeding around that time. And so the idea is that if you get enough people out there doing it, you can probably count almost every bird.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there's going to be crossovers because they'll move from one place to another one during the day, and they might cross over from my location to another person's location and so on. But ultimately, it's a pretty good sampling way of just saying we can guesstimate the population size.
It's a good word.
Guesstimate.
Do you want to explain that one?
Yeah, it's a cross between estimate and guess.
I want to say,
it is a word.
I wonder if I type in definition guesstimate, if I can actually spell it. Yeah, I spelled it correctly. Mm-hmm. How old is that? There we go. Whoa,
it's old.
Okay. So it is pretty old.
It's a legit word.
It goes back to the 1800s. Jesus. But no, that's the graph. So, okay, it looks like it started getting used around 1930s, and then skyrocketed up pretty much overnight. Well, over a decade or so, and now it's been consistently used for the last 50 years. That's pretty cool. Yeah, guess and estimate. Who figured a blend of guess and estimate? And the definition here, and you can use it as a verb or a noun. Guesstimate.
It is, yes.
Or to guesstimate. To guesstimate something. So, an estimate based on a mixture of guesswork and calculation. I'm surprised they didn't say guesswork and estimation.
Well, you could estimation, I presume, is an intellectual calculation rather than actually doing the numbers. But I have no idea of the etymology of the word, but I suspect, and I first heard it in the context of scientists using it.
Yes.
Of saying, let's guesstimate what we think, which will give us a ballpark of how we can, another guesstimate term, ballpark means, is it going to sit inside this zone of data that we can then go and specifically try and test within that. So it wasn't the end point, but it was a good starting point.
First used by American statisticians in 1934 or 35. It is defined as an estimate made without using adequate or complete information, or more strongly, as an estimate arrived at by guesswork or conjecture. Like the words estimate and guess, guesstimate may be used as a verb or a noun. Yeah. A guesstimate may be a first rough approximation pending a more accurate estimate.
Hey.
Or it may be an educated guess at
That is
something
the end
for
point
which
for
no
itself.
better information will become available.
Yeah.
So, and it's now used, guesstimation techniques are used in physics, cosmology, economics, and software engineering.
Yeah.
So there you go.
And in ecology, apparently. Yeah. So
Yeah, exactly.
So we're getting a guesstimate of the population size of these birds in southeastern Australia.
Yeah.
But that couldn't happen. Again, it's simultaneously on the same day, where every area that these birds have been known to occur gets searched. And you simply couldn't do that as a small group of scientists.
Not unless you had a shitload of funding.
Yeah, well, but the only way you can do it is by saying we need a couple of hundred volunteers to go out. And it's a great thing to do, apart from anything else. I mean, the fun part for me is because I've got a four-wheel drive and I'm a reasonably experienced four-wheel driver, I tell them, give me a difficult area to go to. Give me somewhere that you're not going to have your average person in their average car be able to get to. So I can go driving around in these little bits which are sandy and everything else. They're fun to drive in, but it's also just a fun day out where you go, and it's a day out because it's typically from Melbourne or from Ocean Grove. It's a 3 or 4 hour drive to get to the location. So you've got to be leave home very early, or you go the night before. You get up. Out in the morning, by 9 o'clock, you're in the place. You might have actually done the complete search of the place by, 1 or 2 in the afternoon. So 4 or 5 hours out searching in an area. And they have a couple of ways of doing it, but the strategy that I've follow, which is one of their suggested ways, is you simply identify a route through this area where you're covering as much of the possible tracks that you can drive through, and you stop every 500 meters. And you
just look around.
And you look and listen for a minute. And then you move another 500 meters and you look and you listen for a minute and you do the same thing.
So is the assumption there that you're going to be able to hear any bird within 500 meters of yourself?
Yeah. And you can hear them if they're calling. If there's more than one, they'll be talking to each other. So.
Yeah, they're pretty crazy, aren't they? Those ones that...
Yeah, exactly.
Far out. So do you think that this is going to make a big difference to Australian wildlife? Because I think that's going to be one of the crucial things we're facing in the next decade or two, especially with climate change. Well, probably mainly because of climate change, but also with more suburbia, with more clearing of land.
Or habitat change, no matter what the
Do you think that we're going to be able to maintain a lot of these species, or do you think that a lot of them are just going to go goodbye? It's going to be mismanagement.
Well, the big furry and feathery ones, we're pretty likely to save. Because there's
too much economic revenue from tourism.
And look, there's just general empathy for cute animals.
Sorry, little spider and small lizard. No one cares enough about you.
The little fish down the creek that are, where we've introduced European carp,
or trout,
trout, and whatever else in there. So I think there's those obvious species are, and there's a lot of really good examples of projects that are working on those. One of the most famous ones in Australia is the orange-bellied parrot, which got down to a handful of breeding pairs. And there was a drastic move made a few years ago to take most of the birds out of the wild, put them in captivity, breed them up, and then re-release them. And that seems to have been reasonably successful.
Is it the same thing for swift parrots at the moment too?
Swift parrots they're not quite in the status that orange-bellied parrots are, but same problem.
The big problem with these guys is that they migrate, don't they, from the mainland to Tasmania, and so you have to maintain multiple habitats at the same time and make sure they're fine, because if one goes, they're screwed.
Yeah. And that migration is a really interesting one. You look at it and why do they do that? And I'm sure it's because we're in a historical endpoint for them. In geological time, in that you could walk from where we live to Tasmania 7,000 years ago, and those birds would have used the coast of Australia, Tasmania up all the way up into Victoria, and the hinterland of that, and the species that are available and so on. They would have used those continuously throughout that entire range. Now they're stuck with, the sea levels rising a few thousand years ago and Tasmania being separated.
You wonder if they just migrated across the land originally, and then as the sea level rose and made those islands, and then just completely cut the place off, they've just gone, well, we can make the 400k journey, so we'll smash it out.
And the reason they're doing it is because they breed in the southwestern Tasmania.
Yeah.
But winters are too cold for them there, so they move north up into Victoria. But I'm sure that thousands of years ago, they just sort of migrated up and down the coast for a few hundred kilometres, according to when food was available, what the temperature was, and so on. But now they have to make this huge jump from southwestern Tasmania into the south coast of Victoria. And that in itself is a dangerous thing to do if you've got to do it twice every year. You're going to get knocked out by storms. Once or twice a decade, there'll be a storm that'll knock out half the population.
Yeah.
But then there's the loss of habitat in both places, the loss of the breeding habitat, which is mature forest. They need to breed, and then they feed on saltbush areas. The swift parrots are feeding on yellow gums mostly when they arrive here, and the Bellarine yellow gum, a subspecies of yellow gums, which we have a population of in Ocean Grove. And that's now threatened by just housing development.
So do they come they come to this part of Victoria?
They come to Ocean Grove, swift parrots.
Really?
Yeah, well, we've had them in our backyard.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen anything
it's
other
rare
than the
now
lorikeets
because
and
there'll only be 20 or 30 of them that land here. And,
holy moly.
And there'll be a little flock of them that flies around for a few weeks, and
so
they'll move on to the next place.
Back in the day, was it? That you saw those when we first came up here?
Yeah, I haven't seen one for a few years. They're certainly around. Every now and then people report them in Ocean Grove or on the Bellarine Peninsula, and other places around southern Australia as well. But the orange-bellied parrots feed mostly in saltbush areas and salt marsh.
Yeah.
And so their habitat, again, is being just wiped out because people look and go, salt marshes, mud flats, it's useless. Let's get rid of it. And so, we've got to maintain two completely separate habitats in order to have one species of bird survive.
I think people are starting to get that right. The same with climate change, the same with things like COVID. It's not just there's a single answer to this problem. It's a multifaceted thing that you have to deal with on many fronts. And, it's kind of like that rising tide brings up all boats. You have to focus on all boats, not just one, right? Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you want the transcripts and the downloads, join the Premium Podcast membership or the Academy, and I'll see you in there.
And get out and do some citizen science.
Yeah, true. Go do it.
Bye.
Alrighty, you mob. Thank you so much for listening to or watching this episode of The Goss. If you would like to watch the video, if you're currently listening to it and not watching it, you can do so on the Aussie English TV channel on YouTube. This is different from the main channel. You'll be able to subscribe to that. Just search Aussie English TV on YouTube. And if you're watching this and not listening to it, you can check this episode out also on the Aussie English podcast, which you can find via my free Aussie English podcast application on both Android and iPhone. You can download that for free, or you can find it via any other good podcast app that you've got on your phone. Spotify, podcasts from iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is. I'm your host, Pete. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a ripper of a day, and I will see you next time. Peace.